Gorillaz, the self-titled debut album by the virtual band created by Damon Albarn and Jamie Hewlett, was released in 2001. The cartoon concept has been a huge success over the years and is still going strong, celebrating their 25th anniversary. Over the years, the project has had collaboration at its heart, with guests including Bobby Womack, Shawn Ryder, Kevin Parker and De La Soul, and this idea was integral right from the very beginning. The concept for the group came about after Albarn and Hewlett were watching MTV one evening in their shared flat. Hewlett said, "If you watch MTV for too long, it's a bit like hell. There's nothing of substance there." So we got this idea for a virtual band, something that would be a comment on that. Albarn said, "This was the beginning of the boy band sort of explosion, and it just felt so manufactured. And we're like, well, let's make a manufactured band, but make it kind of interesting." The band initially called themselves Gorillaz, and their first recorded track was Ghost Train, which was eventually issued as a B-side on the single Rock the House. Their visual aesthetic is believed to have developed from the 16s, a comic strip that Hewlett created but rejected. He had worked on this with Alan Martin, a co-creator of Tank Girl. Albarn described Gorillaz as a project where he could explore rhythms and styles that he hadn't with Blur, calling the process chaotic and fun. He noted that Gorillaz was his perfect band, with no conflicts, as he focused on music while Hewlett handled the visuals. Damon already had a fully functioning studio by this stage, and had used it for creating demos with Blur. Named Studio 13, it was equipped with a TL Audio VTC console and a decent outboard setup, including reverbs and modulation effects. Synthesizers included the Moog Source and Rogue, Roland SH101, Korg MS-10 and MS-20, Sequential Circuits Prophet 5, Selena Strings, Rhodes Chroma and Wurlitzer. Other more unconventional instruments were also employed. Damon always had a love for the humble melodica, and this toy-like instrument found its way onto the opening single. Co-producer and studio engineer at Studio 13, Tom Gerling, remembers, "The melodica that is used most used to have a pickup on it, a shitty little thing. I think it might have been an acoustic guitar pickup, but these days he just blows it down his vocal mic. He normally does vocals and melodica in the same take, and without any warning." On the recording process, he recalls, "When we started, Damon would have stuff on his 4-track that he'd been working on at home, and then we'd take a good bit out of that and come into the studio and do it again. If it sounded good enough, we'd just leave it at that, and that would be the bass. It might not even be in the tune at the end, but that's what would kick us off. Trying to work out what he'd got on the 4-track, he would have had a drum loop and be mucking about on the guitar. Then we'd record it straight into Logic, try to get some sort of time in the sequencer, and then you can start doing stuff." Ideas came from all forms of inspiration, and perhaps most famously was the idea for Clint Eastwood, sparked by the Suzuki Omnichord 300M. Designed to play harp-like arpeggios, this quirky early 80s sample-based instrument had some presets to play over, one of which was Rock 1, which sparked Damon's interest and ultimately their first hit.
It just came like that.
That's it, that's the preset. It's the Rock 1 preset. But it gets even more.
Wholesale.
That's it.
Wholesale.
That's the whole
Wholesale.
song. Finally, someone let me out of my cage.
Tom said, "There's no real drums on Clint Eastwood as such. One's of a drum machine and there's a sample I got from somewhere. Apart from that, it's live percussion. You know, on a bass drum, you've got the lug nuts that hold the skin on. It's actually a load of those in a carrier bag being shaken. It sounded like it's pitched down too, but it's just EQ'd. The bass is a keyboard bass, which was the Moog Rogue, and on the big fills, it's got a low subnote, which is off a Roland JV. There's a piano in there, which is our little cheesy upright. The strings came from one of our string machines, the Selena String Ensemble. That should have been burned years ago," he said. "Damon gave us the okay to set fire to it on stage, but we said, no, you can't set fire to that, it's a classic, and it ended up being used on 2 or 3 tunes." They continued to create more tracks at Studio 13 before it was decided that it might be a good idea to get a fresh perspective by relocating to a different studio to finish off and bring in a fresh set of ears in the way of hip-hop producer Dan the Automator. They decided on G-Jam Studios in Jamaica, a small but idyllic environment with huts to stay in and a studio that faced the sea. Damon imagined that the relaxed environment would help him write the lyrics, but initially he was very much just distracted by essentially being on holiday. When he did get round to singing his parts, it was through a Neumann TLM 170, into a Neve 1073, with compression from the Yuri 1176 into Logic Audio. Here is a snapshot of a typical session. They used a Boss voice transformer to create harmony parts also. Engineer Jason Cox remembers, whenever Damon does his vocals in the first place, it's always just gobbledygook with a melody that he wants. With the majority of the lyrics written in Jamaica, the titles of the songs don't necessarily bear any resemblance to the lyrics of the song. Clint Eastwood was just called that because a couple of the parts had a sort of western feel. With Albarn and his team, at this point, being very much from the rock world, there wasn't really anything in the way of samples in their arrangements. That certainly changed when Dan introduced loops and kick and snare samples to the tracks to steer them away from a live percussion feel and into something much more contemporary. He also brought in turntablist Kid Koala to add scratching to the record. Dan was very much a big fan of compression, and the studio itself wasn't the biggest or the most kitted out, so they ended up bringing more equipment to the studio than they had there in the first place, Jason said. Neves, Focusrites, 1176s, DBX 160s, I think we had a TubeTech compressor as well, and basically all the compressors were just turned on full. With the 1176, we had all the buttons pressed in at once, with a gate afterwards to eliminate some of the noise. We took a couple of delay units out with us as well, because I think we picked the one studio in Jamaica that didn't actually have any delay units. I was shocked when we got there. I expected to see a whole wall of echo machines. I thought they'd be tape, but no. The feature rap on Clint Eastwood was also a change Dan made. The song already had the rap recorded at Studio 13 with British rap group Phi Life Cypher, but Dan wanted Del the Homo Sapien instead, as he was working on the Deltron 3030 project at the time. The original was going to be kept for the album, but Dan insisted on keeping the recordings on both versions. Using a book on how to write a hit song to aid his contribution, Del was unaware of how much of a hit song it would be, as after doing his part, he returned his attention to other projects until the song became a massive success. The book was bought with a coupon his mother gave him. After the song went platinum, he gave the plaque to his mother. Albarn described Gorillaz as a project where he could explore rhythms and styles that he hadn't with Blur. The first Gorillaz album represented an escape for Albarn, away from the intensity of the waning Britpop scene. Blur's 1999 album 13 tackled relationship breakups, drug use and fading youth, while the Gorillaz very much allowed him back into the more youthful world of pop that definitely had a less serious air to it. Connecting with Dan the Automator gave it a genre-blending production style, and Jamie Hewlett provided crucial aspects of cinematic storytelling, adding distinct characters and texture to the project. This coming together would set the precedent for the collaborative project the Gorillaz became, and was crucial in shaping the unique sound of the group, which would go on to become a huge global phenomenon.